One day, in the good-natured, encouraging spirit of camaraderie, life said to one man, "Okay, here's something to think about." And the man screamed, "No, no!" A history of information. At first, information was plain and point blank. But then things changed. And now a history of knowing what you're doing. A man who knows what he's doing doesn't care. And a chap watching the parade pass from his balcony mused, if life really did know where it's going, history wouldn't have to be written after the fact. Yep, my, how things have changed. The reason the trainers give for staying in the rear is that it's easier to tell what an elephant is thinking by looking up his ass. Boy, no metaphor here for sure. Man is unique among the creatures in that he experiences two levels of animation and excitement. The physical survival one and the neural. And the normal state of each man is to participate in the latter as little as is possible. And while each level can be lived with minimal mechanical attention, it can also be done otherwise. The survival level of animation equals work. The neural, play. And while everyone's work requirements are the same, with play it is otherwise. And for the few, known as mystics, it is really otherwise. A nutshell in a nutshell. Or why psychiatry doesn't work and why religion doesn't work. You can't be cured if you're not sick, and you can't be redeemed if you're not lost. Myth. Originally, men could see. Then they were given words and could see twice. But the second sight had a certain distorting impact on the first one. But soon everyone adjusted and forgot about it. The simple always dismiss those who make extraordinary efforts by noting that they're still going to die just like the rest of us. Which I guess is something to consider. Thus concludes the serious portion of our show, and now back to the humor. A lad asked his dad, "Are the crude deadly?" And the elder replied, "Do you mean, are the crude dangerous?" And the boy said, "No, I'm asking, are the crude deadly?" And the father said, "You still don't get it." This story concludes the metaphorical portion of our show. Now let me tell you that the above conversation literally occurred in the physical juices of one person's brain. And now to that part of the show best liked by Philistines, the nothing part. On a satellite in another solar system was a myth factory, but they went out of business when they wouldn't switch over to chocolate covered. Follow-up. If the survival level of human animation equals work, and the neural equals play, then entertainment is paying someone else to play for you. Definition. It looks like the human race, the world's largest sporting event, and one timed to operate no faster than the mortal respiratory rate. One day in this one place, local conditions suddenly came out with this little rhyme. "Oh, artists make me antsy while the bland put me to sleep. I believe I'll juice things up a bit, but bet I won't know when to stop." And just in the nick of time, life showed up and slapped its face. "Snap out of it, man." Whew, close shave time again. Electricity for the anxious. You can plug into the wall or try to find another place. To be more neurally enthused and animated is to be more conscious. Query, if everywhere they look, mystics see metaphors, what do metaphors see when they look around? Note, you could also ask this using words and reality instead of mystics and metaphors. One of the city's anthems for its loyal residents. You can play with words, you can play with yourself, you can play with your money, you can play with your health. You can do anything that you want to do, but honey, don't you try to move. One man pondered, when I'm not feeling so good, I can always make myself feel better by making fun of other people. But then I don't feel so good about doing that. You think I may be onto something? Fact. Bullets were made to fly. Fact. They'll fly with or without your assistance. Moral. Duck! The ordinary are always enthused more by fear than by promise, more by bad news than by discovery. While routine men may pray for rain, those extremely bored will plead for floods. And now for the got it backwards part of the show. Every time you die, you reveal a portion of your biography. And now this item from our What the Hell Do You Think Was Going On department. Why do only Philistines think to take courses in creativity and originality? Come to think of it, why do they bother? Well, what the hell do you think? After many years of serious occult endeavors, one man began to act sullen and withdrawn, till finally the director told him to snap out of it or he'd let the understudy replace him. Man, the only creature who will, for the sake of fashion, wear glasses when he doesn't need them, and will, for the purpose of limiting awareness, don blinders to inhibit his vision. The stagnant hero of one land stood high atop the city walls and proclaimed to the populace, I will think no thought nor grasp any concept before its time, and the time the mystics propose is always far too far ahead of where we peacefully stand today. And lo, the people greeted this news with as much excitement as enthusiasm as is minimally required by an urban neural life. The reason neural warriors never take prisoners is because they had too many mouths to feed to begin with when they had only themselves, which is one of the reasons they took up the martial path to begin with. And an observer notes, there certainly were a lot of begins and reasons in that sentence. Yes, sir, you are correct. And originally there was a reason for this, but as always, once you realize it, it's no longer pertinent. And the gentleman pressed, so why did you bother to say it? Sir, such is the glamour and glitter of the verbal world. And with that, he left to find a place where he could surrender and turn himself in. The way things work in the monastery. The younger monks believe that the older monks know the secret, while the older ones look at the younger ones and ask of themselves, so what happened? Where did we miss it? Daddy, is this why real mystics live alone even when they're with somebody? Follow-up to an earlier follow-up. If enthusiasm is what gives the joy to man's neural life, then entertainment is paying someone else to be enthusiastic for you. According to one lesser-known Holy Scripture, what you have to look forward to in heaven is that everyone will be world famous and no one will be envious. Your shadow twin just asked where he could sign up. One way by which the crude and simple can tolerate their condition is by continuing to act crude and simple. The city took aside a group of people who were proving to be totally unsatisfied and accepting of the speed at which things were moving and said to them, look, life wants you to be enthusiastic, but not that much. Regarding belief, if you believe what cows believe, then you too are a cow. A man recently was struck. It would seem as though a fully functioning human could do anything possible for a human to do, even if it appears not possible in his individual case. Men generally find it easier to be enthusiastic publicly rather than privately. At an early age, one kid concluded, you can either read about weird people or be weird yourself. And just in time, life showed up to circumcise him, give him a haircut, tell him to shape up, send him off to school, and otherwise sufficiently distract him from his initial foolishness. You can either talk about the human condition or potential. And with a crowd that has triple lobes, you can do both. Heroes. If the future is not your hero, You're never sufficiently enthused. The ordinary mind was not meant to be original. That's where the more conscious come in. Regardless of how the ordinary interpret the genetic myths, the more awake know that home is always up ahead. In regard to some of what we were talking about last time, the combination kind of dance and dynamics that life operates that is both stimulating and soothing. And I mentioned that it's almost as though life is tickling one publicly, as tickling one, and at the same time saying, well, don't overdo it, which is the distinctive difference, operational difference between man's survival enthusiasm, the excitement of staying alive, and the neural enthusiasm necessary to be just an average sane person, but which, from one view, is not necessary for absolute physical survival. But it struck me, God, you could look at it, the combination, it's almost as though life, and especially you could say through civilization, furnishes man with caffeine-based mixed drinks, like Irish coffee, that you have both caffeine, a stimulant, and you also have alcohol, a depressant. Because that is exactly what happens with a civilized man. And some of the ones specifically, even if I don't go back and read them, I'm sure you can recall them. But you can look at well, one of the things I mentioned was that if you look at the animation, the word itself, and I'm about to divide it up into the survival animation and the neural, this animation itself has the definition of, which I can improve on, of actually being alive, but also beyond that, of past the point of being alive, is being zestful, being spirited, being enthused. At the survival level, everyone operates at a minimal, or at a minimum. It's all that's necessary. As I was pointing out, although you can get exercise and build up muscles and etc., to believe that that is going to make you survive longer, you're probably the type of person that plays the state lottery and believes that the IRS will never find you. In other words, there is no need for any great, if you're just middle class, middle of the road sane, there is no great benefit to trying to be more enthusiastic about survival. It is one of the many hobbies I've tried to point out that is foolish. It's useless to someone attempting to be more conscious. That is to take up health as a hobby, which the more civilized people become, you might notice, the more health becomes a hobby. Which again, those of you that like to see physical theatrics, it is this complex overlaying, because from one view, you would think that the less civilized would be more concerned with health. That is, right now, if we were talking about people living in a cruder, less civilized, like a tribal setting, there's still islands and parts of this planet where there are people living at almost just barely level of sustenance, just barely staying alive. And so you might think at first, well, now those people, as opposed to us, in America, most people, all statistics, are overweight, eat too much, drink too much, sleep too much. And so at first you might think, well, those always living at the edge of starvation, living in little grass huts and having to move constantly, at first you might think, well, it would be proper and be expected that health would be a greater concern to them. But it's not. You've got to be more civilized for health to become a hobby. Now they're trying to stay alive, same as you are. That is, and they do it by whatever enthusiasm, the excitement necessary. And the excitement in their case may be that they have to get out and look for food, chase down berries or animals, move about. They may have to spend 14 hours a day just to get enough to feed them and their family, whereas you might be able to spend a couple hours driving down to the welfare office and pick up your check, waiting in line and parking, a couple of hours, and you got it. Then you go back home and you lay down and you hear statistics about being overweight and fatty tissue around your heart and too much salt. And you lay there eating popcorn, drinking beer, going, that is true. And if you could reach a pencil, you'd make a note about what you should do, like, cut down. It becomes a hobby. It's neither here nor there, but it's silly. Anyone who understands anything, health is not a hobby. But you can notice, I don't have any statistics, but if you just watch the local and network news or read magazines, surely one of the top 1 or 2 subjects that they cover is to your health, today's health, the latest medical breakthroughs. That is not a hobby. It's not a suitable hobby if you're trying to be more conscious. Because at the survival level, the basic level, it does no good. It's just you do what is necessary to stay alive. And anything beyond that is a hobby. But to believe that it's more than a hobby, to believe that by running and exercise and going without sugar or salt, if you think that that is indeed seriously salubrious to your health, you just got a hobby. But it is not a fit hobby to anyone else. At that level, at the survival level, the enthusiasm, the excitement necessary, you can look at, the animation necessary, you can look at it as equaling work, which is no big secret. It is work to get out. If you were in a less civilized and sophisticated environment and you were out having to chase down food for a large part of each day, that is work. Going out now, whatever you do for a salary, is work. Notwithstanding the fact that you may be making such amounts that you have, as they call it, discretionary income, that you could actually knock off at 12 or 1 if the boss would let you, and that would be the amount of work necessary to keep you alive physically. But if you look at the kind of animation, the kind of excitement, the kind of enthusiasm necessary to survive at the physical level, it equals work. Then when you get into the second level of animation in man, whatever enthusiasm, whatever excitement goes on there equates to play. You then have, I sometimes call it entertainment and hobbies, you then have the situation of what do people normally, or the question of what do people normally do to satisfy the second level. Just so that you could keep in mind something substantial. As you look at the level of enthusiasm and excitement, and down here it's physical and it's survival based, and up here it is neural. And down here, there was a regular line I draw of level of consciousness. Down here, whatever you do is necessary to survive, and it's work. Now I know with ordinary people it gets all intertwined in the same way that I was mentioning that after you probably don't actually have to work 8 hours a day for a salary to live. And so the rest of it is, well, I don't want to just eat, I want to get a new car, I want to move up in the world. But when you get above that level, you're dealing with play. Down here, there is no question. It's a survival level. If you're saying there's no question as to what direction, what kind of activities, the enthusiasm, the animation will follow. It follows the pursuit of finding food that will keep you alive, finding shelter that will protect you, and etc. It's not in question. Enthusiasm, I said one of the items is similar. You can say it's the same, but at least they're similar. It doesn't matter whether you live here or you live on the other side of the world on a South Pacific island in a grass hut. The kind of excitement, the kind of enthusiasm, the kind of animation required to keep you alive at the survival level, and this person on the other side of the world in a much more feral setting is similar, to say the least. Same things. Food, shelter, water, sleep. But when you get above that level, when you get beyond the level of work into the level of what is play, then the similarities cease. Then you would think at first that it's almost every man for himself. And there are many more apparent alternatives. Down at the survival level, the only thing you can eat is food. The only cure for for being tired is sleep. The only cure for thirst is water, or liquid. But when you get into the neural level, and you've got enough animation, you've got enough enthusiasm that you are a verbal creature, that the intellect is fired up, your brain is operational above the limbic system, then what you need is not necessarily the same. There's a person down the street, much less on the other side of the world, but a person down the street or in the same house with you, they may get their neural nourishment for no more than watching TV, daydreaming. Whereas you might find, well, I must at least go to a serious foreign film at least once a month. Or between comic books, I periodically, I don't know, once or twice a year, I will suddenly go back and dig out one of my old college anthologies and read a couple of pages of Balzac or Shakespeare. I don't know. And somebody collects stamps, somebody else collects coins, somebody else goes out dancing, somebody else stays home and listens to the radio. But there is one thing glaringly lost or lacking at that level, and that is any originality. This is where mysticism comes in. And since I'm doing definitions, to remind you again, I've been using that word again of late because there is really no particular better one to remind you of the shank of the definition of mysticism. It is the belief in the possibility of insight transcending ordinary knowledge, which is, fairly safe. You don't have to be a crackpot. You don't have to be a crockpot. But you don't have to be a crackpot or insane to understand that, because there are people who would intellectually wired tight enough that would probably disdain the term mystical, but who would be pursuing philosophical, artistic endeavors with the same goal in mind, whether they use those words, but they could take the words, that the belief that there is possible to have insight, because artists do believe it, composers, many of them have tried to say so in certain ways, even verbally, besides their actual artistic creations, have tried to express the view that's very common about, well, there's something in me that's trying to come out. And if I say, well, what it is it's all, you can almost equate with mysticism, that is the belief or the longing, the suspicion that there is possible to have some sort of insight, some sort of understanding that goes beyond ordinary knowledge. And go, yeah, I believe that. You don't have to make anything spiritual out of it. You don't have to make anything occult and New Age or weirdish out of it. But that is mysticism. And in that sense, that is where, when I said that originality is lacking in the kind of enthusiasm, the kind of interest that men have neurally, normally, there is no originality. That only comes about through those, or through a person who is actually pursuing. They're not just sitting there passively with the belief that some sort of insight is possible. So that's the dictionary. It's the only good way to start. Their definition is the belief that it's possible to attain insight superior to or transcending ordinary knowledge. A real mystic is some way beyond believing. He is actually in some way trying, no matter how feeble it may be, but he is beyond the point that he is sitting there in an armchair or just read the idea and went, yeah, and forgot about it. Then in some way he's to some degree actively entangled. They could be no more than watching something like this on a television show, or attending lectures, or periodically reading a book in a serious way, of trying to bring his own understanding to the book, and that sort of thing. People consider that they are original, and from a broad view you can say that humanity as it progresses does come up with original ideas. I'll warn myself and you, this is getting off where I was going, but I did throw it in tonight, that ordinarily the mind will be enthused. Men find it much easier to act enthusiastic, which is a form of originality, to do so publicly than in private. Because what passes for being originality in life, if you just take a quick cursory glance over the history of man's progress, now there's no doubt people's names stand out, from arts to science and technology, that names stand out, and yet it's collectively that life seems to progress, that things seem to happen. Oh, all right, I stepped in it. You would think, just what I said, if you didn't misunderstand if you were listening, you would think, well, that's exactly wrong, because contraire, it is single names that stand out. A Thomas Edison, a Galileo, a Michelangelo, a Rembrandt, a Titian. You know, that it is individuals that make things move. Think you got me, eh? Consider this. Rather than me just point out why that's not true, because it's not simply not true, it's just... Notice, even though that is said, even though that would be an ordinary mind's, an ordinary culturally oriented intellectual man's mind, that would be his reaction why I said that you're wrong. It is individuals that make progress. Look at them. They're the ones that stand out. They're the heads above their time, whatever it was in their place. How about this then, Bunky? Why is it that there's almost as much time spent, as per the historical survey and notation of these famous figures, these individuals, why is there, I suggest, almost equal space used in an attempt to analyze and explain how did a Shakespeare pop up? Because average minds find it to be a severe anomaly. And nowadays they engage in after the fact psychology, trying to find out, trying to dig up records about, well, wait a minute, exactly what kind of home life did Galileo have? And what kind of impact did the churches, snotty at it, they try to analyze, how did it happen? Or Shakespeare, how in the world, just out of nowhere, out of some old cheap theatrical company hanging around the West End of London, a bunch of no good, just suddenly this guy comes out and seems to have an astounding, almost an otherworldly grasp of different personalities, of the kinds of emotional drives behind the facade of individuals' men's apparent actions and freedoms. How? We don't know who the hell he was. How do you explain that? I just did, see it, but I did it right in your face to start with, which made it sound, I had to back up from it, because what I said, I put it so point blank to you that if an ordinary person heard it, am I losing you? They would have gone, wait, you couldn't be wronger if you tried. See, because I started out pointing out that the enthusiasm, the originality of man is best done, is easiest, men find it, to be done publicly and not privately. That is, collectively and not individually. And even after I said that, then I said, but then notice, ordinary people would say, wait a minute, that's not true, it's not collectively. Committees do not paint the Sistine Chapel. Committees do not get together and produce the statue of David. They do not build the Colosseum. It's one man, one man's mind, his originality, his creativity. You couldn't be wronger. Okay. Gave you a chance. Collectively is how men feel. At most at ease, closest to some form of originality, some form of creativity, which, all right, another quick sidestep, is why men find it so inexplicable, faced with mob behavior. I'm slipping off the main path one more time on the other side. Is it historians, psychologists, decent social observers just drool or foam at the mouth over the continuing outburst of crude, regressive, absolutely unexplainable behavior that this decent group of people over here at such and such time, such and such place, suddenly, it's like some kind of virus got into them and they just went mad. I mean, whether it was just a weekend in some Western movie, where it was when they used to take out guys and they'd all get drunk in town and go string up the guy and find out the next morning that he didn't do it. And everybody, ooh. All the way from that, it just took 24 hours to something that took a quarter of a decade of some great war. Some people that just seemed to have gone absolutely mad and slaughtered their neighbors. And people go, historians, always after the fact, go, how in the world, how can we explain this? What kind of anomalistic behavior is this? It's not anomalistic. People in mobs at the time, whether it's a 24-hour mob or whether it's a 25-year mob, out collectively, which I'm using synonymously with publicly, they feel closer to something creatively. Which I'll grant you, we're back to this, because you go, wait a minute, what's a mob in the full sense of the word? That is the derogatory sense of a mob. How can you call that creatively? I guarantee you, those involved, not those struggling against it, but those suddenly they holler, let's go out to jail and pull that son of a bitch out and hang him. And they go, and have a few more drinks, and you just stand there. And they go, why are we going to wait? You know how the judicial system works. He may get out. They may turn him loose. Did you know that the family that he killed out there, we all knew, farmer so-and-so. He not only killed him, the sheriff admitted it. He took the little 12-year-old daughter and slit her throat and left her there. She was alive, and he left her to bleed. Everybody, and finally, 2 more hours, and finally one says, I've had enough. You're right, John, let's go hang that son of a bitch. And you're there, and suddenly, during that time, it feels creative. It feels as though we're doing something original. We're doing something good. I know, but it is. And if you want to see it the other way, then ask yourself the question that has no vocal answer is how original, how individualistic do you ever feel off in private by yourself? The answer is, well, at least for you people, I'll answer it for you. Compared to you at your best, you off by yourself normally doing your best, you realize this is not my best. I can do better than this. Okay. The enthusiasm, the animation for the two levels of man publicly and privately, and life almost feeding people through civilization, through the institutions. It's almost like a mixed cocktail, remember. It has a stimulant and it's mixed with a depressant. I was going to pull out another great example that seems to be psychologically and sociologically valid, but it's chemical. It's brain juice time. It's bad news. Bad news, and I've used it as an example for those of you keeping score many times. Pointed out in several ways, and one broad scope is bad news is popular because of the fact that human evolution, in a sense, is bad news because it's never completed. That the parade never gets to where you feels like, well, we reached the point. It never does. And so therefore, you're a sitting duck for bad news. Well, more floods on the way tomorrow. And you thought, well, shit, I should have known that. Because that's just the feeling that people have at a certain level, a certain real, valid nervous system level, is they realize that the end is not here. And so therefore, any bad news, you're susceptible to it. You're open to it. But now, let's plug into a different place in the wall for you electricity freaks, not electronic, electricity freaks. Bad news is specifically of a certain sort, it has a certain impact in the area that we're talking about tonight. You can hear bad news and you can do no more. It's like you can hear it and you can be enthused by it. Try to listen with 3 ears, because I'm going to have to cram a bunch of words that none of them fit together, but we'll straighten it out, won't we? Well, I'll straighten it out. You get enthused, but it's like a passive / non-exertive, in a passive, non-exertive way. To wit, you can hear bad news, and all you got to do to participate is kind of shake your head and sigh and enjoy it. It's not required you do anything. I know. Here we go. Let's say you're sitting there watching TV, and some horrible news. The typhoon just hit the Baja California and wiped out all sorts, killed all kinds of people, and just unexpected. And but anything resembling, now I call it good news, but it's non-bad news. But anything resembling good news, it almost demands that you participate in it verbally and mentally. You hear on the same news, there you sit and they get through with that, and they detail some new scientific discovery. Or even a theory, but a scientific discovery that they've just made in space, or some new observation to do with the sun, that you hear it enough, that makes enough sense, that catches your attention. For you to be enthused with that, for you to be fed at the neural level, it almost demands that you in some way do more than shake your head. Give you a second to think about it. Now we're talking about that you really listen. That you went the same way that you listen to the starving going on somewhere, some real big dose of bad news, you went, that's all you got to do. Even if somebody's sitting there, let's put somebody in the room with you so I can go into the second part. Somebody's sitting there with you. You're watching TV and they just come on, they show horrible pictures of a slaughter somewhere, something just awful. And all you do, and you look over at the other person and go, huh? And they go, no. Now I say that's all you got to do to enjoy it, and I'm not going to stop and beat around the word enjoy. Because we've been through it enough, you've got to know that there is a sense of enjoyment. That is, it nourishes a certain very crude and simple part of man, or the National Enquirer would not be outselling the combined leather-bound works of Charles Dickens and Shakespeare and Balzac. Bad news always sells. But all you've got to do, it requires really no exertion. You understand that you can feed off of it, but it is passive. And I'm not saying passive to pick on TV. I'm just picking out the obvious, most common means of communication now. Because you can hear it from somebody else. Somebody can actually, you can be standing around the water cooler and somebody, did you know so-and-so used to work here? Yeah. Did you know that he killed his wife and all his family, cut their throat, shot them in the head, burned down the house? And you go, oh, we told you they used to work in accounting? Yep. And you and everybody else, you kind of look at it and go, there's really nothing to say, in a sense. And you know why? Because nothing need be said. You do not have to participate any more than much more than just to passively hear it and go. But if you hear something that is not, that you could not actually classify as bad news, and I was just trying to figure out something that's fairly innocuous, it could be more, but they're harder to, examples are not that easy, but how about a scientific, you either hear on the news or there at the water cooler, still the conversation falls off the guy from accounting, the mass murderer, and a few minutes later maybe somebody says, did you see Nova last night? Did you see the news? Did you realize that they got the cameras working back on such and such telescope on one of the explorations just around Jupiter, and they come up and they say, they realize now that the atmosphere on Jupiter, and let's say that you have some interest in such, man, do you realize that they have changed what they consider to be where there is any actual land mass, where there's any solid mass to Jupiter, it's not as certain as it was that now, actually, and you listen to that, and some of you got some interest, as much as you did hearing about the guy in accounting that killed his family. And you listen to this, it almost demands, and I'm saying almost, you understand, in those funny little marks, flea wings, for you to participate, for you to enjoy hearing about this to hear about this good news. For you to enjoy it to the same degree that you enjoyed hearing about the ex-employee in accounting slaughtering all of his family and burning down his house, this, on the contrary, demands that you engage in it in some way, that you actively participate, either verbally or mentally. I gave you a choice. It's and or. If nothing else, to yourself, if you were sitting there at home and heard it alone, for you to enjoy it, you would have to talk to yourself to something about it. And now I'm fooling around, I'm almost getting into soap opera voiceover time. I've got to tell you what your mind would be saying, and I'm having to make it up, and it's never exactly on the money. But if you were sitting there alone and you heard that, you would have to, in some way, you would talk to yourself, your mind would recount, well, that is something, because they have thought now for 30 years, that Jupiter was nothing but gases. And if it came about through that meteorite breaking up and hitting it, and you go, boy, isn't that something? Your mind might say something, what would happen? And that leads you into something about meteorites and how they're thinking about now of what would happen if they came in closer to the orbit of Earth, and etc. For you to enjoy it, you in some way have got to participate. If someone was there, let's go back to that situation, besides just talking to yourself, you understand my first example, you heard about this horrendous thing that happened. They just told it on TV, and you go, oh, geez. And you look around at the person sitting next to you, and they go, yeah. And then a few minutes later, they tell about some new discovery about Jupiter. And you hear it. It is almost required that you will turn around, that you will actively participate in some way, that you'll turn around to the person and go, if nothing else, go, hey, that's weird. You understand? That you'll at least say something. You will add something to it. You go, he did say Jupiter. Or you might say, is that the satellite that actually the camera had been dead for 2 months? You'll say something to get the same sort of enjoyment. When it's bad news, it is almost, as far as we can say it, it is almost passive participation. That about all you got to do is just acknowledge that you heard it. The information got in your brain is what I meant by, whew. The guy killed himself, all the family, burned down the house. It's like that's as much as you needed. You chewed, you got the enthusiasm, you got the energy out of that bad news, and all it took was go. But to get a similar amount, the same amount of nourishment and enthusiasm from non-bad news, you've got to do more than that. Does anyone understand, now at a different level, why non-bad news does not sell? Why it is not that popular? It requires that you do add something to it. And we're hard-pressed to call that originality. But compared to simply sitting there or staying there by the water cooler, when you hear the bad news, go, huh, everybody's staying around the water cooler. And goes, oh, really? Oh, whoa. Did you just express your sympathy or your outrage or your disbelief? Like, oh my, what's the world coming to? But if it is not bad news, if it does not qualify as bad news, you cannot ingest it and get the same sort of nourishment, even though I know it's just like that, you might say. But it's just like that keeps you alive for 6 to 8 years. It's one bite after the other. Neurally, you've got to bite more often. Physical food, you can sit down sometimes once a day. 10 minutes, eat enough to keep you going. But up here, as long as you are conscious in the mechanical sense of the word, in the neurological sense of the word, that you are conscious, this thing is eating. It is constantly taking in nourishment. When I said that originality is not the norm for the mind, but I did want you to see that reacting to what would be non-bad news, good news, comparably speaking to what it takes to react and take in bad news, that is just, it takes that much effort, if you call that. But you understand, that is not original. Nobody calls that original. You wouldn't say, well, I was being creative. When I heard the horrible news, I went, no! It's ridiculous. Whatever you can think of, whatever reaction to hear about a tragedy, you know damn well you're not going to come up with anything new. It's all been done before. That's why they have sympathy cards. Nobody takes it. I was going to say personally to get one, but they don't take it impersonally either. I mean, what can you say when somebody's dying of cancer? They just had their left leg amputated. You go by and damn card. They know you didn't write and said, sorry, here your leg got cut off. My best wishes are with you. And what else can you say? They don't expect originality. They don't expect some kind of cute limerick about, There was a young man named Chekhov who had his poor leg cut off or something. Back before we lose the point too severely, hope. Remember, I was trying to get you to see, I put rhetorically that was one of the reasons that good news has such a limited audience. Amongst other reasons, but specifically in an area in which I'm talking about tonight, if there was some possibility, if it was like open to change, that was open to the possibility that good news could be as common as bad news. That instead of fear, that men could hear and be enthused by hope, by promise, in the full sense of promise, not just dumb belief, but that is, that if men in some way understood the parade is not stumbling. Individually, you look in there, and sure, people stumble. A guy just killed his wife, and all this, he tripped. Hell, you tripped. But a man who has any consciousness outside, above street level, which is being more conscious, being more awake, being insightful, being a mystic, because everyone else is walking at street level. And the only way they explain, well, the reason I'm back here in the parade is they claim they're an animal trainer. For those of you that laughed at that earlier and didn't get it. And the way they explain it, they go, well, you can tell more what the elephant, the thing in front of me is thinking by looking up its ass. That's why I'm back here in the middle. Yeah, right. As if they had a choice. Being in the middle of the parade, being conscious at the mechanical and neurological level is street level awareness. You cannot see above anything. That's why there's been all kinds of attempted descriptions all the way from the Vedic literature of 6,000 years ago right up until today. Some psychologists are, I'm sure, trying to coin a new term to write a new book. But it's this low level of almost stunned consciousness, of being just, your attention is held here and there, and you don't seem to have any control. You don't even notice it. It's not that you can't control it, because you can. Remember, caffeine proves that in a sense. What? Oh, never mind. But you don't have to. And it's a struggle to do it. And why do it if you don't have to? Huh? Oh, okay. I thought you said something. Oh, what was that? So that doesn't take any effort. And it certainly doesn't pass for being original. But ordinarily, people, you don't stand around accusing one another. You're asking a cop or you're asking a stranger in a town, how do you get to such and such street? And the guy goes, well... You don't say, hey, snap out of it. Your attention's getting all mechanical. You don't even think about it. Well, since you laugh at that, how about worse than that? You're at a doctor, a physician, having a checkup for something. You think you're dying, and he's done all these tests and cost a large amount of money, had to go to labs, and you come back to see him, and he looks over the paper and he says, well, now this is pretty complex, and it's not all good and bad, but now sit down, let's go over this. And you look at him and you realize the guy is sleepwalking. And you would think, his life's in my hands. And you want to grab him and say, give this damn thing your attention. And you look and you realize that half his brain is thinking about the weekend. Or as people pick on our friends in the medical profession, he's worried about his golf game. I'm dying. I could be dying. And him going, okay, it says here, what did I... See, not only does none of that, it's obvious when I point out, none of that passes for originality, creativity, but on the other hand, under ordinary conditions, no one looks at it as being questionable. Because if you're operating at that level, if you're walking along in the middle of the parade, behind the elephants, to the side of the elephants, people tripping next to you, bad news, gossip going all up and down. Did you hear up in the front of the parade, a guy killed his wife? And somebody, yeah, back here, a woman killed her husband. What? And then somebody steps on your foot, somebody trips, somebody's bleeding, and you just, you're like... You're in the middle of it. It's sweaty, it's hot, there's all kinds of crude, uneducated, unsophisticated, unwashed people in front of you, behind you, and on each side of you, including you. At that level, nobody notices it. Everybody's in the same parade, but then to tell somebody, well, the parade's going along nicely, in the middle of the parade, nobody can see that. Now, that's how many people that's been above the parade, many people who had like the extreme mystical experience, which happens, they have it once. And then they come back down to that level and they spend the rest of their life kicking at other people, kicking at themselves like, you idiots, I could see one time, this thing is nothing like we think it is. It was like, I got above it. It's like I went up and flew around the heavens with, the creative force, with the Buddha spirit, and I looked down and I'm telling you, all this stuff about life is terrible and that we're killing each other and that, listen, we got no idea what's going on here. And it's true. But once you're back down there, you can't do anything about it. You're stuck with trying to become a prophet, a proselytizer, a condom salesman. Back to sort of where we started this evening. The mind. Now remember, at the survival level, there's no question of originality and creativity. Remind you of that again. That is just a very simplistic hobby for people to think it is. That is to think like to get bigger muscles in some way will make you more conscious or make you a better person. Everyone knows there's nothing wrong with that, but that is a physical hobby, and it will not change what you are. And there's nothing creative about it. There's nothing original. There's nothing individualistic about it, because the only thing making you do it is sex to begin with, and sex requires another person. We're talking about real sex. I say that in case we have any of those people at the University of Oklahoma watching in the dorms. At the survival level, there is nothing sane, there is nothing profitable in the area of originality. There's nothing new to eat, there's nothing that should be new to eat. There's no new way to sleep, there's no new way to screw. There's no new way to live. You just live. The only area that's open to originality is in the area that's above survival, not work, play, the neural animation of man, the one thing that makes him unique. But there, people end up being as collectively as they should. We're talking about the mass of people. They end up being as collective, being as mob-controlled as they do properly at the survival level. Down here, everyone's a cow. I gave you one that seemed to draw on a blank tonight that said it was about beliefs. I should have said a short, complete history of beliefs. If you believe what a cow believes, you are also a cow. The point is, if you believe what other people believe, if you're surrounded by Catholics and you're a Catholic, you're a cow. But if you're surrounded by Catholics and you're anti-Catholic, you're still a cow. It doesn't matter. You're still dealing with belief. You're still dealing with street-level consciousness in the middle of the parade. There is no more with the ordinary person. Remember, and I also pointed out in one tonight, that the ordinary mind is not intended to be individually original. It is not. But people do not realize it. What is easy to see, all you got to do is just look around. Kind of, take your focus away from being the kind of things I was imitating before about the doctor and everyone else, and everybody laughed like, boy, isn't that true? All right, as long as you're not doing that, all you got to do is look, and you realize that there is no ordinary originality going on even up here, not individually. What seems to be originality is simply a change in fashion. There is no originality going on. It is not intended to. It would be too abrupt. But people believe they're being original, but they are as mass-driven, they are as herd-driven neurally as they are physically. And physically, they're supposed to be. And neurally, hate to tell you, they're supposed to be. But they're supposed to believe otherwise. Because there is a looseness to the neural level of man that is not down here. That is, you can put it to you another way, which will sound strange enough. There is a little more leeway to be crazy neurally than there is physically. Which again, if you like that, I still like that. Belies all sophisticated, up-to-date thinking, because it should be just the opposite. But it's not. There is a certain kind of looseness in the machinery that drives the neural level. Kind of the same way in the gears that I point out, there has to be a certain kind of looseness. Gears cannot fit exactly. They will freeze up. And so in the neural level of man, the animation that drives that, there is a little kind of looseness. In other words, you can go crazy. You can do weird things. You can do things that are, in a sense, unproductive to you neurally, and survive it, that you could not do at the physical level. You can drink a little poison up here. And down here, there is a severe known limitation as to how much poison. But up here, you can drink a lot. If you don't believe that, look at entertainment. Look at what normally feeds people. Now, again, I'm not attacking it, but in a sense, you look at what passes for entertainment, which I gave you two views of that strung out tonight. Entertainment can be seen as two things vis-a-vis the description I'm giving now about the animation, the enthusiasm, the excitement, the nourishment that men get physically at the survival level, and that which is they get at the neural level. Entertainment can be seen as two things. One is you're paying somebody else to play for you. That was the first one, and then I waited 8 or 10 items, and I did a follow-up to that and point out, if you look at the survival level, the enthusiasm, the fuel, the energy that drives you, as you look at that as work, just absolute, is already locked in what's demanded, what's required. There is no profitable area to talk about that you can play with it. You just do what's necessary to live. You got the kind of enthusiasm to live. That's the only excitement life demands. Up here is not actually required. It's more than work. I'm just going to call it play. And up here there seems to be a little that you can either collect stamps or read romance novels if that feeds you, or you can read travel magazines, or you can actually read science journals. That there seems to be some choice up here. Then what is entertainment normally, though? The follow-up, the other view I tried to get you to consider was entertainment of all forms is actually paying somebody else to be enthusiastic for you. Now we've gone this far, it verges on, without people analyzing it particularly in this manner, it verges on you paying for what you take to be someone else's creativity. Because it's called that. Well, I went to see a movie. Well, how was it? Well, it was a Scorsese movie, and you know how creative he can be with that. And he wrote it, or so-and-so wrote it. Whoever's the hottest screenwriter. It was taken from such and such book. Did you read that new thing the last year? No. All right, they got the author of the book. He did the screenplay, and then they brought in Coppola to direct it. And you go, boy, that's a creative bunch of guys. I'll have to see that. It's not creative. No offense to the movies, but don't pass it off as being creative. Only a mystic is creative. Only someone who can think beyond ordinary knowledge is creative. The rest of us not creative, but why is there demand for it? Why is entertainment now, I suspect, probably the at least second, if not first largest business probably on this planet. If it's not, it will be soon. What is entertainment? Now I know you say, well, I'd love to go to art galleries, or I'd love to watch a good TV show because of the creativity they put into it. It's not. But even if it was, do you realize what you're doing? You're paying somebody else to be creative. They're not, but that's what you're paying. Well, I'm going to go pay because I like to see movies. Ordinary person, you waste your time arguing with them, of course, but now I'm talking to you. To read a book, to read a magazine, to pay somebody else to entertain you, to show their creativity, you're paying them to be enthusiastic up here. You're paying them to do the very thing that many of you sit there and go, well, how come I can't get more out of this at time? Why don't you tell me the secret, how to do it? Well, there's part of it. In fact, part of it's listening to me. Not really. See, that gets to be interesting. But it is. See, a real mystic, anyway, I can tell you this, no offense to any of you, because some of you got all the makings, but a real mystic, you never see him. That's one way you tell a real mystic from a semi-real mystic. It's like the difference between drunks and alcoholics. Drunks don't have to attend the damn meetings. The enthusiasm that a mystic has feeds only himself. And he cannot think the same thing over and over. It is a real form of incest. When he realizes I keep thinking the same thing, I don't care how great it was. What if you had a sister? I hate to get crude, but what if your sister's the most beautiful woman in the world? You're still not supposed to be sleeping with her. And you think, I just had the greatest mystical thought in the world. Well, great. But that was your sister. Don't sleep with her. What do you mean? Well, don't think it again. Yeah, but I want to write a book about it. I want to tell you about it. Well, you already told me about it. Yeah, but hey, maybe I didn't make it clear of how astounding this was. You're sleeping with your sister. It's incest. It's beyond cannibalism. It's incest and then eating your relatives. But see, that's the ordinary way. That is what feeds the ordinary progress of the parade. It goes along at a certain tempo, and what passes for enthusiasm, what passes for the transfer of energy and nourishment up here is always a form of incest. It's why I say that it's not actually accurate to say that these little heads that pop up of individuals are the creative ones. I know it appears to be that way, but it's not. It's not a Michelangelo. It's the whole parade. And the only way that he got there is why I was trying to, I know it got convoluted, that why some people now, there's always somebody trying to explain what were the environmental dynamics that suddenly produced in the lingering stages of the Dark Ages, that suddenly upsprings a Michelangelo. How can you explain that? Well, you can explain it because, in a sense, he didn't exist. The creativity came about collectively. It was just like he was the bump. He was the mouthpiece. He was the Ken or Barbie that popped up and did it. That life did it. The creativity, the originality, is limited to an individual mind. Is that a good place to stop? Are we out of tape? If we're out of tape, that's a real good place to stop. That's a good place to stop. Now, lay down your notebooks and close them. Time's up.